Should we play music then, or are you gonna sing?
Well, I was going to sing, but then we'd probably have to let all these people know that they're going to fail as a result of that kind of trauma. We don't want to go through that.
We also want positive reviews, to be fair. So yeah.
Um, First off, thanks everybody for joining. We're super pumped to be doing this. Missy and I have held a couple of these kinds of events before, but we thought it might be useful to actually break down individually each part of the process for everybody. But one thing we always ask for is like the more that folks can turn on their video, the more memorable this is and the more enjoyable that this is, especially for us, because as much as we love talking about Stanford, we love less talking into the void. So hopefully this is helpful and fun for everybody.
That's right. Where's everyone signing in from? Can we get the chat going? I'm over here in San Francisco. Deanna, oh, that's cool. NYC over by you. I love this part of a group chat, of a group call. We got to do it, you know? Got to get a sense for where we are.
Yeah, Nigeria, let's go. I'm working with
That's
somebody.
so fun. Nice. Oh my gosh. This is a global affair. I love it.
Where is Provo? What is Provo? Providence, Rhode Island? No. Okay, Dalen's laughing at me. I don't know. I've never heard of Provo in my life. I'm gonna Google it because I can probably look this up. In Utah. Oh, it's right down the block from Leland. Is that why you're shaking your head, Dalen? Okay, fine, fair enough.
Yep.
It's very specific. You need to up your geography game.
Sorry, but like no, it's not happening. Okay. It's an hour. Okay, nice.
Awesome. Cool. All right.
All right, let me reshare.
Wait, before we get in, is there anything folks are really hoping for us to talk about today? We have some slides planned, but this will help us know where we should make sure to focus most of the time. Are there any particular parts of the application? Reapplicant advice. Okay, that's great. Essays, yay. I hated writing. Hopefully we can get into some of that. How the two essays connect. Yep, we'll definitely get to that. International applicants. Yep. Love it. Let's see, career vision, relevancy, applying for the deferred program. Okay. Love it. The whole, yeah, I love it. Keep this stuff coming.
Yeah, and Stanish, I think that's a great point as well. Like I think there's like a lot of there's a little bit more art than science to like making sure you have a holistic narrative. So I think it's a great point. Yeah, short
answers. Yep. Yes, Colin. Time management is so much work. Love it. Military applicant. Yes. Right time to apply. Great. I think we'll cover most of these, but what we'll do, this is great, is a good sense check. And then we'll leave plenty of time for questions too. So this will be more dynamic as we go. All right.
Missy, tell me if my yeah. So first, before we actually get started, first thing you guys might want to do is actually to scan that QR code. So Leland uses QR codes honestly better than a lot of organizations throughout their PowerPoints. So that's like the first step in like thinking about working with Leland. They also have a ton of like great free stuff that you guys can browse through. You've got Leland Plus, which is like a subscription thing, but like honestly, like it seems for especially for like at least the 6 months leading up to your app, like there's just so much content on there that they built out. So cool stuff. And then you can obviously browse through the profile of various coaches. So just wanted to mention that before we dove in. Okay. Missy, I'm happy to take this.
Yeah,
but just before we get into specifically, you know, Stanford app and MBA apps, like Leland, I think, and I think a lot of the coaches feel this way, is really trying to offer like a really broad spectrum of coaching in general, whether that's MBA, career, a range of other opportunities. Basically, it's you have a goal, work with people that have gone through the process, who know it inside and out, and really expedite both your means of getting in, improve your odds of getting in, but also like the enjoyment of the process and kind of removing a lot of the stress, hopefully that is naturally built in. So that's a quick note on Leland. Yep. I mean, I literally, so this is a great slide. Missy, happy if you want to chime in here too. But just had 3 people get into GSB today that I was working with. So we are now representing 0.75% of the incoming class in just round 1. So pretty pumped about that, and hopefully more calls to come in the coming days. But just like, I think having done this part-time, and Missy and I both have our own careers, which we'll mention in a bit, but it's a really nice thing to do part-time, but also like really support people very heavily throughout the process. And when they actually end up getting the goal that you actually have shared in the past, it's just an awesome thing. So Missy, I don't know if you want to add anything here, but.
No, I mean, this is what it's all about. I worked with a coach and I was so grateful. It made my process so much easier. And it's, I was a little skeptical at first, but it's been so rewarding and fun to work with folks on this stuff because it totally changes your life. So anyway, let's hit it.
Awesome. So we decided to put this event together, and appreciate those initial questions in the chat because we do plan on getting to basically everything on that list. But when you think about what like a comprehensive amount of work looks like, either with a coach or just in general as you navigate the MBA process, really it comes down to what I would call like high level strategy, thinking through the app, what you're shooting for, what your goals are, and then actually getting very tactical across, fixing up your resume, getting your essays in tip-top shape, figuring out who the right people are for rec letters, and then ultimately things like interviews, and then should you get to the exciting piece, thinking about choosing between schools and scholarship negotiations and things like that. So we have kind of put this presentation together with the idea of like what would great look like across each segment of the application, and how do you do your best to maximize your chances of getting it. So that is the idea. Missy, I'll kick it to you. Tell us all about why you're cool and why I look up to you, even though we're like the same age.
So I was a chemie back in the day at Georgia Tech. Go Jackets. If there are any other fans over there. Long story short, I had thought I wanted to be a PhD, decided I didn't want to spend that much time in a lab and didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So I ended up joining McKinsey, where I was focused on a lot of really incredible healthcare work. Found out I really loved healthcare. I don't want to get too much into all the details, but the short version is I've spent most of my career working in healthcare, health tech. I ended up going to Stanford, which was an incredible experience because I got to meet and become friends with Ben, but also I discovered how much I love startups. That wasn't what I applied with. I applied about going into government, so we can come back to that as we talk through application strategy. Ended up starting my own company and in the healthcare space, and now I lead commercial for a larger health tech startup. So excited to chat through. I often work with a lot of folks like me who went from engineering to other areas. So excited to be here with you all today.
Awesome. And yeah, Missy, did you mention that you were quite the singer at GSB Fun?
I didn't. Yeah, and in a fun way. And this is stuff you should include in your application too. I wrote about this. I love to play music. Me and some classmates started a band called Going Public. Ha 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 ha. Startups. Okay. Yeah, you get it. But yeah, it was very fun. Don't underestimate just some of those things you can talk about in the application, like how you're excited to get involved outside of your career interests.
Yeah, Missy and I, for what it's worth, on a scale of 1 to 10, jokes for Missy, like a 2.5, singing like a 9. I'm the reverse, but really probably a lot lower than 2.5 on the singing. Okay, so yeah, Missy's awesome. We are very lucky that she's joining us, especially because she's a busy woman these days. Quick note on me. I'm doing something pretty different. I'm running a chess company. I think also touching on Missy's point of like, you go in with a lot of ideas and like a hypothesis on what you want to do. But it's okay if you move and you actually learn a lot of other things and you pivot and you make change in a different kind of way than you might have expected. So I think the only other thing I want to mention is like, did a lot of work. Like my thing, in the way that Missy is good with using words vocally. Like I like them on paper. So writing's always been my forte and the thing that I love leaning into. So I ran the GSB magazine. It's called Non-Disclosure. It's awesome. Basically giving students a voice on campus. And then I also was a managing editor for the International Policy Review for Stanford. So I just love writing in every form. Did speech writing back in the day too, for the mayor's office, in addition to policy stuff. So just really enjoyed a lot of this, and I love my time at GSB. And it's kind of cool to be like on the other side of it now. And looking back, it's still like I'm excited for the next reunion and get together. So good things, good things. Okay, we hit that. Missy, do you want to take this? How do you think about? I think one thing that a lot of people think about first and foremost in the application is like, hey, what if my GPA is low? Hey, what's going on with my numbers? What if I don't have the greatest score in the world? Or where do I sit if I'm a little bit below the average, around the average? So curious how you think about scores, Missy.
Yeah, I'd say it kind of comes back to some things folks were getting at earlier about the holistic picture of the application. These are all averages by design. So people get in with scores a lot lower and a lot higher. It's really about the comprehensive picture of the person. And we can get into some more details there. But yeah, I would say sometimes when I meet with folks, they find a lot of this stuff really discouraging, but it's not about this on its own. They really are looking at the holistic applicant picture within a certain range. And then the other thing I saw in the chat earlier was just when to apply. And I wasn't sure if that question was about which round or about like at what point in your life. I don't know if that person wants to clarify, but you can see on average, 5 years on average work experience. I know I was below that. We had classmates that were way above that. So there really is no right or wrong time. Generally, it's how does it fit into your broader goals outside of business school. We can talk more about that in Q&A too.
Yeah, and I think Missy hit the biggest point here. It's like, yep, small class size. Yeah, usually people applying have great work experience. Usually they have good scores, but do not self-select yourself out of this process simply because of one of those things maybe not being as high as you want it to be, or not being at the average. That's completely fine. The thing I always tell people is like, if all they were going to do is take people with like high GMAT scores, which I think would be a completely insane criteria, they would just have a list of everybody who took the GMAT and rank sort it and just like copy that Excel, and then they'd have their class. That's not how this works. And I frankly have worked with and seen people get into awesome programs, Stanford and more, who had 690 on the GMAT, 710 on the GMAT, nothing insane, but they worked hard. They showed a trajectory. They showed that they put the work in, and they had really strong other pieces of their application. So just something to keep in mind and to get off the table before we dig into some of the other uniquely Stanford things. Okay, maybe I'll start, Missy, because I did a bunch of these classes, and then you can jump on top. So taking classes, I think, around the school is a really cool piece of Stanford. But one thing I also want to emphasize beforehand is like the actual range of electives at GSB are pretty great. And there's a lot of really nitty-gritty startup-oriented classes. Go ahead, Missy. Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know that a lot of you might already be thinking like, yes, Ben, we get it. We already want to go to Stanford. I would say the reason this slide is important and why you might want to take notes on this is these are all things you'd want to highlight potentially in your Why Stanford essay. So that's all. But please continue.
Thank you. That's actually a great framing, and I'm not surprised that you framed it for me. I think the pieces here that are great is like, if you are actually going to voice to or speak to something or look at something and include it in your essay is like, hey, the Design for Extreme Affordability program, like awesome thing I got to do and actually had written about it in my essay. It has to fit with your narrative. Do not spend your essays telling them why they are so great. They already believe this thing to be true. Spend it talking about how you'll contribute, and we'll get into this more later, but how you'll contribute and what you'll take away from Stanford that is actually relevant to your specific narrative already. So don't waste time listing a bunch of classes. They don't need you to regurgitate their website for that. Okay. I think the other stuff around, in addition to like, schools and dual degree programs, I think the startup ecosystem is pretty awesome. And the biggest piece of it, for me at least, was just actually meeting other people with a whole range of experiences who are passionate about building things. there are great resources at a lot of schools, but I think Stanford is super well positioned and attracts a very specific kind of person who wants to build and is actually innovative. And they'll do the hustling pieces and the nitty gritty, and they'll raise capital and they'll get something started. So for me, that was the biggest piece. But Missy, maybe, and I was impacted by this a lot too, but Missy, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the soft skills piece and what you get from that.
Yeah, and this is genuine too in your school selection. And I know I joked, a lot of you're probably already bought in on Stanford, but I think one of the things that's true and special to the Stanford program is it's really about this professional development piece of your experience. It's less, hardcore business boot camp, financial modeling. When I work with people on school selections, like that's more of something I think of for Booth or for Wharton. They're really rigorous in how they think about emphasizing those quantitative skills in their program. There's a joke, Stanford, everyone pays to sit around and hold hands and cry, it's a joke because it's a lot about relationships and leadership and how you show up in the world, how you communicate more effectively, all those things. And that for me, as I'd done the engineering quant boot camp in my undergrad, that wasn't at all what I wanted out of my grad program. So Stanford was perfect for me in that sense. So that's, and there's a lot of ways this shows up in the culture of the school and in some specific things called out here: touchy-feely, which is the most famous class, reputation management. Those are all really helpful around just growing as a person in addition to as a professional and all of those great things. And then the last one, not a secret to anyone here, incredibly strong entrepreneurial ecosystem. I was totally blown away by it. And that being said, as you think about like why Stanford and calling out why it's a fit for you, a lot of people know that Stanford has a great entrepreneurial ecosystem, and a lot of people talk about, oh, I want to come to like start a company. So we can get into maybe some Q&A later about how to think about standing out when it's something a lot of people apply, saying they want to do that and be part of that program.
Awesome. All right, I think we hit on the main pieces here, but maybe to summarize my also my thoughts on just like the skills piece and the soft skills piece. Like I think a lot of people, I honestly, I think guys as much, like maybe even more so, like they don't realize, like they haven't like thought about like how you show up as much and how you act. Nobody cares what you know, and nobody cares how good you are at something if the way you show up makes them feel like garbage. Like nobody's ever going to want to hear from you. You're not going to be able to influence anyone. So one of the fundamental theses of this school is how you act means as much as what you do. And so I think that's really, really important. So, okay, let's get into the essays, because I know this is like a huge piece. So let's look at the chat real quick. You absolutely can get in with a couple of years of work experience. Again, all of these things, guys, I'm noticing like in the chat, what if you have a lower GPA? What if you have like, try to address this up front, but these questions will naturally come up, and we always are like, asking for a friend, but it's like actually, our thing. The main thesis here is these are averages, these are medians, these are not fixed numbers. Again, if they were like thresholds, they would, like Stanford would state a threshold. A threshold for them is you must take the GMAT or the GRE. You probably want to get a good score if you can, get the best score that you possibly can, but it's not something that you will be ruled out on if you're below the average on anything. So it's an average. Okay, cool. Essays. Missy, we should probably both talk about like our essay writing processes, but like I think this essay is particularly well designed, and I think for Stanford in particular, they are trying to figure out the core of who you are to the best that you can tell them. And I think it's different than just like, what do you value? What will you contribute to the classroom? Anything is fair game so long as it's relevant to your narrative. But I think it's an awesome question. Missy, maybe you want to talk about your writing process or anything there.
Yeah, and I also want to be responsive to what you all told us in the chat too. I saw a lot of folks talk about broader application strategy, like fitting this whole thing together. And Ben, I've heard you say this in the past, like this essay is kind of the heart. If your application was a human body, this is the heart. This is like the soul of the application. And so I think the pre-work before, I guess they don't have to be in any exact order, but you can think about your entire application as like a very personal marketing project of like, how do you package up what's unique and special about you, your greatest strengths, how you've been applying and succeeding with those in the world, and how you want to use Stanford to keep doing that and keep doing it better going forward. And yes, this recording will be available later. And so bringing it back, so yeah, we can come back to broader application strategy and Q&A, but this essay in particular, for me, I took some real reflection time. I like to do a little design thinking. I like to look at all the data. So like for me, I looked back at what of all the choices I've made, what like at the different chapters of my life, like what did I love being involved in? Like what brought me the most energy? Where have I been really successful? What kind of feedback have I gotten? And I started to look at all those experiences and information and say, like, what does this say about me and what I care about? Like what types of things do I keep choosing to do over and over again? And why do I keep making those choices? Like what are those things I'm prioritizing? And for me, in my case, it was a pattern of empowerment. I'd made a lot of choices throughout my life to consistently like, give people tools to achieve, a la coaching. Makes sense that I'm here, I guess, right? So I that was the thing that valued me most, like empowering other people to improve their lives was my thing. And at first, when I wrote that, when I gave my first draft to my coach, I like talked about a lot of different professional experiences, which I see a lot now when I work with people in the first draft. And it's like, okay, that's great, but there are a lot of other places in the application where you have like your resume and your professional experiences, and like this essay really is a place where you can be personally vulnerable and share a lot more about who you are. You can do more storytelling. And so I'd say for me, I started by arriving at the topic, and then after that I also started, my first draft was a lot of, maybe more professional pieces, and then my second draft and eventually final draft was much more personal about how things in my family had affected this for me, and like why I cared so much about this based on my own home environment and how that had shaped me, and stuff that I would have thought was incredibly off limits. And my coach nudged me on it, and I'm so glad she did, because once I got to the school, it made sense. Like the school's culture and rituals, traditions are all very vulnerable and personal. So I think it all made sense to me after I was in the school. But at the time, I thought that was really odd. I see the question in the chat, Kira, of like, oh, is there stuff that's like really off limits? If I assume you might have a very specific personal experience in mind that you might not want to throw in a public group chat, in which case, feel free to DM me on LinkedIn or message me on Leland, and we can talk through that, because I don't want to say always every personal thing is on limits. So happy to chat through that more if there's something you're unsure about.
Missy, I think great points all around. I wanna add a few things. I think, especially for this essay, and this is where we can spend a little bit of time. A couple of questions in the chat, I think were provoking me to kind of respond. Are there certain topics that are off limits in the personal essay? Nothing is off limits categorically. Does it fit within your narrative? Is the only question you have to ask yourself. I'll give you some goods and some bads. A good is, I have a project I worked on at X company, and it was super meaningful to me, and it's the type of thing I've been working on in some form or fashion for many years now. It just took a different form at this new company. That's perfect, fair game, fits with your narrative. Awesome. A bad example is something that you deem to be impressive. I worked on this high profile initiative. I did this cool thing, this cool project. I got publicity for X, but it doesn't actually fit your narrative. It's just like a random, cool, impressive thing. That's for your resume. Keep that out of the essay if it doesn't fit with the theme. On the opposite end of the spectrum, when we're talking especially around vulnerability, it is totally fine being vulnerable. You can talk, I've seen everything in an essay, and I included some very personal things in my own essay. It has to fit with your narrative. If you're just dumping like bad things that have happened to you or people around you in your essay, not going to go anywhere. It's just going to seem like you're baiting for an interview based on some kind of pity party. Just doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because it comes across as shallow in the opposite direction, in the way that you writing about a bunch of detached work experiences comes across as shallow from the kind of like corporate professional sphere. Being overly personal, but personal and irrelevant, is equally useless for your essay. So think about those things and just try to remember to stay focused on your overall thesis. The reason I'm saying this in a very like kind of like almost black and white kind of way is because having seen like hundreds and hundreds of essays at this point, that's really what doesn't work versus what does. And it just rings like, yeah, it just rings like you're trying to get in based on some event or some circumstance. Fine, you can try, you just won't get in. And I think that the main reason is that it drifted from your central narrative. So long as you can keep that central narrative, anything's on the table. I just wanted to hit those because like this essay can get twisted and turned in a lot of ways. Answer the freaking question. What matters to you? Awesome. Then use examples to evidence why it matters. If you don't do those things, your essay has failed from a technical perspective. And then we don't even have to get into anything cool around like style and whatever. So I think style and keeping your voice is great, but make sure you stay kind of on the actual question. Okay. Sorry. I get so like this question. I think like I get so many questions about like, but I thought I had to explain this. Like, what about this transition in my life? Or like, what about this big thing? It's like, no, if you're writing a paper, like if you're writing a paper on like a book, like if you're writing a book report and the book is about you, just in this case, like you can't just randomly include details from a different book. Like that would seem kind of irrelevant. This book is about a component and a through line of your life. Okay, I'll stop talking now. Missy, anything you want to talk about for this slide in addition to what we already touched on? So yeah, maybe rooting it in our experience is probably a good thing to emphasize.
This, I think the header is wrong on this slide, but this one's about the why Stanford essay.
Okay, cool. So it's maybe why Stanford. Let's all imagine it.
Sorry, apologies, the header's off here, but yeah, this one's about the second essay, the why Stanford essay. And
like overriding everything and just being like the header's wrong, and so therefore the slide is invalid. It's great. Great stuff.
No, I'm sorry. You can take the girl out of McKinsey, but you can't. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, the why Stanford essay is again about fit. So up until now, your application reviewer will have looked at your resume, your short answers like, who are you? Where do you live? Where have you worked? What are you telling me you want to do after business school? Your scores. They've learned more about who you are as a person. Like, okay, maybe like Missy, she was an engineer at Georgia Tech. She like loves healthcare. She loves empowering people. She like wants to go into government and work in Medicaid and help people like achieve health because health is a human right. Super cool. I get it. But like, why Stanford? Like, why does she need to be here to accomplish those dreams? And so the why Stanford essay then becomes again like it's about like the fit and getting specific into like why this place for you, both in terms of like how is Stanford going to support you and how are you going to attribute to the experience for everyone else in the class. So on that first one, like I mentioned before, I was like, hey, you know, I've like my quant skills are exceptional. I love math. I'm not the writer that Ben is, but I can crunch numbers all day long. I want to come to Stanford to learn how to show up as a better leader in the world, to learn how to do more soft skill oriented things, hiring, firing, org design. Like, how do you think about like, yeah, a lot of other business related things that have helped me start a company. And that sort of fit into my story, right? And you all have your own version of this. Of like, what is it that you think Stanford could offer you? Like, why are you on this webinar right now? Like, why do you want to go there actually? Like, is it because you think Stanford's a great brand? Hopefully it's a better answer than that. It's there's something very specific you think Stanford could offer you to help you get to a goal. And so that's what that first piece is really about. And then a lot of people I see leave out the second part of this essay. I was editing friends' essays often before I joined Leland, and this part was always not there a lot of the time. Just like, what are you going to contribute? And for me, this was about, I really wanted to grow as a coach and a manager in business school. So there were these specific programs at the school, like Arbuckle Fellows, where you mentor and learn how to be a great coach and mentor first year students through a really structured program. So I was really excited about that. Secondly, I was like, oh, I love music and want to get really involved. That we put on a big musical every year. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to be in that show. And the way I think about that section is like painting them the picture of like, they can already imagine you as part of the class. They're like, okay, cool, I get it. Like Missy wants to be here to learn how to like be a better leader and a better coach. She wants to be she's going to be part of the Arbuckles program. She's going to be involved in the GSB show. It's like, I've already like by the end of this call, they see me there. Like they get my story. They understand why I want to be there. It all fits together and is congruent. It makes sense. And at the end, they're like, okay, I get it. Like this is why she wants to be here specifically and not at a different business school across the country.
Mm-hmm. Great points, Missy. I think I'll add on to the last thing you said too. It's like the one sentence I always tell people, and I was telling someone on the call earlier today, is just like, you want to go from sounding like an applicant to sounding like an alumni. And that's exactly what Missy's talking about. Like, you're not like jaggedly dropping in alumni that you've spoken to and like awkwardly including this random class that you hope to take. Like every single thing that you include in your GSB essay should be either something you hope to leverage as a resource to help you achieve the vision you're planning to achieve, or something you are planning to contribute to while you're there, so that they can kind of slot you in. Like they can see how you like what functions you would play in the next class. I also think some other stuffs to mention is, again, don't spend time telling Stanford why they are so awesome. Don't waste sentences on like, Stanford is a leading entrepreneurial they know. Talk about what you're going to build, like fast. Like say, I want to go to Stanford so I can do X. If your first sentence says something like that, you're in much better shape than 80% of the people who are applying. And if your second sentence says, the way I hope to achieve that is by taking advantage of A, B, C, and by putting time into X, Y, Z. Awesome. Like, you don't need to use fancy language. Don't cite any resources. Don't list a class that has like 12 words in it and a title, and then by the professor, and I hope to like get coffee with him one day. Like, fine. Just talk about your vision and see Stanford as like the accelerant, the conduit through which you achieve that vision. Last other thing I want to add here is like, Missy touched on it, but this should not feel random. Like the best applications, you read what matters most and why, and then it almost feels like the essay just continues into your why Stanford essay. They flow seamlessly. And the reason it shouldn't feel random is the things you hope to achieve in the world should be rooted in some way in things that you have done or work that you have actually put forth on planet Earth thus far. The example I always give is because I see it nice with the editing on the fly. Great stuff. Make it essay B. Great. Awesome. Cool. So the investor who, like, this is just an archetype I've seen a lot. It's just like the person who spent like a couple years in consulting, transition to private equity, and has basically done random stuff the whole time. And like, yeah, smart, successful, great. But then they randomly tell you that they're going to start a nonprofit to solve the recycling problem. It's like, no, you're not. Like, there's absolutely no chance that you are going to actually be working on that problem, because there's literally no evidence in your entire past to suggest that you would. And I love that. I love that you want to solve recycling, or so you tell me. Why don't you go spend a couple of years doing that first? Then think about how Stanford might, accelerate what you're trying to do. And so when I say it shouldn't feel random, it should flow from what you care about. Because what you care about something should inform what you want to build in the future and your overall vision. You're allowed to change, you're allowed to have pivots, you're allowed to update the software, but it shouldn't feel like an entirely new phone.
And
okay.
You touched on something else, because I think at the time I felt a lot of stress around like, oh, but what if I don't know? Like, cool, Ben and Missy, like, easy for you to say, like, you guys have these very specific paths that you knew that you wanted and the story all made sense. No, like, definitely not. Like, I got to a story that I felt good about, but I still had lots of questions. So I think I just want to say, like, it's totally okay if you don't feel like I know exactly what I want to get out of this experience and where I want, and I know what where I want to be, like, but you do need to have a version of your story that you feel really good about as a strong hypothesis that you can present to them. Because, and honestly, you'll kind of need it when you get to business school. It is drinking out of a fire hose. It's honestly, you're going to need a hypothesis like this to help you know what to say yes to and what to say no to, because it's so overwhelming and you'll have so many options for how to spend your time. So it's actually a really helpful exercise to go through, like, what's my best guess of like what I want to get out. Okay, that's all.
Yeah, if you guys could remember anything of what we just said, it's Missy's last 30 seconds there. Okay. Awesome. So we touched on this. I don't think we need to double down necessarily here, but this is the synopsis, basically what we just talked about. But these essays should, again, feel like they flow from one to another and could theoretically be one continuous essay. Okay. Yep. Take a screenshot. Look at that beautiful slide. So how many cumulative years at the firm we did? Okay, awesome. Awesome. I think that is generally what we want to talk through, but I think we want to take no, we have more stuff. What the heck? I think this slide's a little early, but again, you can sign up for Leland here. Midway plugs, like one of those ads you see on YouTube, I guess. So let's keep going. Letters of rec. Missy, do you want to start, or do you want me to lead?
This, I'll start here. This to me was one of the hardest parts of the application because I had to ask for work from other people. Like I can buckle down and get an application knocked out. This part is just not as much in your control. So I think I always found this to be one of the hardest parts. The thing I would say here is this also is an important, piece of, if your application's a human body, like maybe these are the arms. You need to figure out how these are going to complement the broader story you're telling. As you think about who can speak to and tell specific stories about your strengths and how you've shown up in the world to date. And I use those words intentionally. Sometimes I hear a lot of questions around, should I pick the more senior person or the person who's worked more closely with me that actually knows me? And I think the most important thing here is you want to bias towards people who can tell specific anecdotes, show, don't tell, about how you've been awesome so far and how it fits into your broader story. Because you can imagine being an application reviewer right now and you read thousands of letters of rec, right? And the ones you're going to remember are the specific stories. They're not going to be like, oh, Ben is awesome. I worked with him here. He was really great. Thanks, goodbye. You should accept him. It's like, no, they're going to remember. I remember Ben put off studying for his own exams for a week to support, Timmy and Layla through this really trying experience. You know what I mean? It's the specific stories are what's really going to drive your application home. Okay, I'll let you take it.
Yes. Okay, so let's get into each one. I think we kind of break them down as two, but I think it matters for Stanford in particular. Do not I'm sure there will be questions in the chat that'll take the form of I haven't really looked, but well, what if I have this specific thing that is very unique to my circumstance? I work for my ex. It's whatever. Just, it's fine. Just make sure they are your current direct supervisor. If they aren't your current direct supervisor or the next best alternative, it's not what they're asking for. And as crazy as it sounds, these MBA applications, while there is so much talk and Reddit style conversation around I know what they asked for, but what they really want is, forget it. Answer the damn question. What matters most to you and why? Why do you want to go to Stanford? And give me what your supervisor says. That's what this is. If you don't do those things and you write your what matters most essay about a bunch of seemingly impressive work experiences, and then you get a random senior partner from a place that you work at to write your rec and it comes across as vague and nondescript, don't be surprised if you don't hear from anyone, because it's not going to work. There are lots of random circumstances. I work with people who've gotten recs from their co-founders, from family businesses. I know I see the typo, sorry. But there's a lot of different circumstances that they have managed. They have seen everything. I guarantee it. Just do the thing that they say to do, with the obvious exceptions of don't get your mom to write your letter of rec, or your best friend. Just don't do obviously silly stuff. And you're probably going to be fine here, but just know what they ask for on letter of rec number 1. Okay. Number 2. Missy, I'm happy to talk through this one, but
yeah, go for it. I'm responding to some great stuff in the chat, so take this.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, the letter of rec questions, by the way, are always I always find the funniest personally when I'm going through the app, because also, for what it's worth, and I think Missy hinted at feeling this way too, is like it's awkward to like ask someone who's a lot older than you or someone you look up to be like, hey, can you like accelerate my career and also maybe not here? Do you mind if we do that? That'd be great. I'd love for you to help me with my career somewhere else. That would be really great. So it's a weird ask sometimes, and I totally get it. So I wanted to mention that, but this second letter of rec, I think, offers a little bit of flexibility in the sense that you can ask someone like a board member at a nonprofit that you volunteered for many years, another person who's worked closely with you in some other capacity, maybe a little bit more senior, maybe not your current direct supervisor, but someone who can still speak meaningfully to your work. All those things are great and fair game. I just want people to remember the difference between letter of rec 1 and letter of rec 2 for Stanford in particular, because all the schools don't necessarily do this. And I remember when I was going through the process, Stanford was kind of unique in this respect of asking for that direct supervisor. So don't be like put off if that person like isn't like a head of state or like some super impressive Googleable person. If you really feel like that person can speak well to your work, make that your second letter of rec and do not force it and do not do something that they're not asking for. Missy, anything you want to add here?
No, I'm getting a lot of, or agree with +1 with everything. Oh, sorry, AirPods. Can you hear me, Ben?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Agree with everything you just said, and then I'm seeing, do you need anecdotes where you want stories? Stanish was asking, would it be better for them to share stories about your tangible impact or just someone who's your biggest fan? That's really.
I think you definitely want like they're not asking for somebody who really, really likes you. Like there's a difference between somebody who really, really likes you and somebody who you've worked closely with who can speak to your work and your potential. There's often in a letter of rec some overlap. You want to solve for the second one, and then it helps if that person's a fan of yours. Typically, like what you want to speak to is more like your character in kind of a more classical sense, less than like, yeah, they're so fun and awesome. Like, what do they bring? What do they bring to a place that, otherwise might be kind of dry? Do they spice it up? How do they do that? Do they hold it? Like whatever it is, whatever little things that you do that make a difference.
My other thought is, I honestly think if someone's willing to write you a letter of rec, they're probably already over the threshold of enthusiastic about you that is required to write a good letter of rec. So I suspect you wouldn't end up in a situation where someone would agree to write you a letter of rec unless they're really supportive and excited to support you.
Yeah,
definitely.
Good thing though. Sorry, I think a good thing here though, like if someone gives you a hint, take the hint. So if they say something, if you ask them, hey, would you be open to writing me a letter of rec? And they go, I would love to. I just don't know if I could speak too well to your work. And I'm not so sure. Like I really know what it would take to write this process. And if they don't sound super enthusiastic, take that hint. You can get other people. Like, again, current direct supervisor or next best alternative. If your boss and you aren't like besties, all right, that's probably fine. But if you feel like, you have a contentious relationship with somebody in that position, like, all right, seek that next best alternative, take the hint.
The other place we've gotten a number of questions is around deferred applicants who, of course, don't have, necessarily a direct supervisor or lots of work experience. Totally fine. I am working with some deferred applicants right now, and it's generally a combination of someone who's been a close either like mentor or advisor to them in some extracurricular context, and or maybe a professor who they've worked with really closely to supervise research, for example. So it can take lots of different shapes and forms. It's a little bit more nuanced for deferred applicants, and it's not, Stanford gets that, and they and other deferred programs don't expect you to have a direct supervisor, of course. Kira, your question on timing, more recent is better. There's some, I don't know exactly, Ben, what you would say the statute of limitations is, but I think if you need to have someone who's probably within the past 5 years for sure, I would say. Otherwise, it's kind of odd. Have you not been, right? Would you agree with that?
I would say they say current direct supervisor. So what they're trying to get at is like, who's your immediate day-to-day boss? And can they speak to your work? And the reason that they ask that is like, Stanford believes that like your most recent past behavior is the best indication of your future behavior is kind of their thought process here. So don't say that I necessarily believe that, but like that's what they believe. And I would also add here that the situations that are, I think, most relevant that come up on this front are, hey, like I worked for this person for a year and a half. I switched jobs 2 months ago, and now I'm doing the MBA process. Don't go to the person you just started working with, unless you like hit the ground running and you're just crushing it and you have amazing stuff to work at, and then you can get both managers. Go back to that recent manager. That I think is totally fair game if it's a recent job change or something of that nature. Let's see if there's anything else here. Let's see. Yeah, thanks for handling the chat. I think again, around the, yeah, okay, I think we've answered all the questions in the chat, so maybe we keep rolling here. Okay. The interview. All right, this is a great stage to get to because you're already halfway home and you've cleared definitely the most significant hurdles of the application, which are getting through the essays, etc. That is, I think once you get the interview, you're like 40-45% chance getting in. These stats I think can be a little bit tough to see. I personally like almost self-selected out of the application process. I get it. It's daunting and it seems like there's going to be a low chance, and people will have questions like, okay, like what about if I had come from this traditional background and what happens if I don't have anything crazy to say off the top of my head? It's like, okay, that's when you got to dig in, because a lot of people come from traditional backgrounds and a lot of people from backgrounds you wouldn't necessarily find the most impressive, as they say, get into these schools and make something out of them. So do not rule yourself out. But to the interview itself, the thing I always like say about this is like the Harvard interview feels like a multiple choice test. Like I remember going to HBS, I thought I was like in some like Orwell novel, like walking up the spiral stairs. Everybody sat down at 9 a.m. and they were all called into their little rooms and summoned by two Harvard people. And I was like, I was literally asked 15 questions, I think, in 25 minutes. I don't even remember the interview because it was like very robotic in my opinion. That said, all the power to the HBS people. We're not here to do that. But I think if HBS's interview is a multiple choice test, Stanford's feels like an actual essay or a piece of writing, in the sense that you will talk extensively about a couple different stories and really dig deep into those experiences, because they're trying to get an idea of not just how you think, but how you act and how you are emotionally and how you perceive those around you. And honestly, like they just kind of want to know a little bit about you and how you think about yourself. And a lot of this is just about how you come across, not always just the specific content of your answers. For what it's worth, last thing I'll say here is like my interviewer turned into one of my biggest supporters, mentors. I took her class. I TA'd another one of her classes. I've helped her on startup projects. I've worked on a variety of things with her. She's a role model. I've hung out with her house, with her kids and her husband, who is a former baseball player. And I just interviewed him about what it was like facing all my favorite Yankee pitchers growing up. So you never know where the heck this is going to take you. But I think it's a super, super meaningful interaction with maybe a lot more potential than meets the eye. But I'll kick it to you, Missy.
Yeah, I would say I heard a wide range of experiences. I know Ben highlighted this already, but just everything from really casual coffee shop interactions like mine versus others who felt like it was much more intense. So it really just depends on the personality of who you get. Yeah. So I wish there was more structure or predictability here, but the thing you can count on is the questions will all essentially, you'll definitely get why Stanford, surprise. You'll also definitely get a number of different softball, professional development, typical job interview type questions, or maybe like talk me through your resume. Nothing that's going to be a total curveball that will throw you off. It's as long as you've really authentically crafted a story and understand what you've highlighted on your resume, you should be in a great spot to succeed in the interview.
Yeah, and you're gonna get somebody, like they will pair you up with somebody who's like an alarmingly close depiction of what a future self of yours might be. Like it's crazy. Like you'll be like, oh, like I did this, this, and this, and then you see this person, it's like, oh, they did this and this with like the Mario mushroom, like, and it's like 10x everything you did. So it's kind of cool to, I think, meet your interviewers. And whenever I've helped people prep for interviewers and like going through their profiles, I'm like, oh yeah, it kind of looks like what you might look like 10 years from now. It's impressive. But what I think they do that for is so that you can have a much deeper conversation and skip all the bullshit and skip through all the like jargon, and they can speak your language. And there's also no getting past it. They know your world better than you do. So they'll be able to snuff out BS, and they'll also be able to understand when somebody's actually done something compelling and reward you for it. So that's why I think they do it. But man, I mean, these alumni, yeah, like I think for HBS and a couple other schools, HBS was just like a trained AdCom interviewer. And then for a bunch of other schools I did interviews for, it was like a current student or a very recent alumni. I think Stanford emphasizes like really giving you like a seasoned alumni who has a lot of experience under their belt and knows your world. Cool. All right, guys, deadlines, fun. So this is when stuff is due. I'm gonna say my piece on this first, Missy, but start early. The best applications are those that start early or as early as possible. It's okay if you haven't. But the analogy I randomly stumbled upon giving today to somebody who I was talking to is like, if you've ever made food from scratch, like, and not bought it in the store, like it only tastes good if you actually go through the process and take time, let the water boil, do things like that. Start your essays early so that the ideas actually have time to marinate, and your drafts can actually evolve as you think, and you actually have your gears turning on them for weeks, maybe months at a time. So that is what I would say around these deadlines. But also just remember, life happens. Any week that you feel like you can make some tangible progress, freaking do it. Just getting started on each piece of the application is so important from a more of a psychological perspective, because there's a lot of random BS work in here nested throughout the application process, filling out the short answers, adding bios to all the different apps. It's like, you'll go through the app and you're like, geez, like there's just all these random things I didn't know that they would want to see. But open up the application and get started early. Like literally just open it up and peruse through the things so that you actually understand what all the puzzle pieces are. And you don't ask yourself time wasting questions like, oh, like, will they ask about this? Or like, I really want to include this piece in my application. They have an award section. They have short answers underneath each one of your job experiences. They allow you places to emphasize things so that you can keep your main essays focused on the actual questions and you don't spend time talking about tangents. So I'll stop there, but that's my 2 cents on like deadlines and maybe some process and management in there too.
Love it.
Cool.
Else, do people feel like what else have we not covered? I know I saw some folks call out things like international applicants, military applicants, and would be helpful if you're one of those people who asked about those things to just let us know if there's specific things you're wondering about as they pertain to international applicants or military applicants. The reason I say that is all the advice we shared today is relevant for anyone applying. And as far as those specific communities, there might be some tactical advice that you're looking. Oh, reapplicant advice. Ooh, Ben, yeah, I know you got this one.
Yeah, I've actually helped people on reapplications, and honestly, they have higher chances of getting in from the data that's been made available. The main reason is that they know you're pretty serious about wanting to go there because you went through the MBA process twice, and that's a lot of work. And they also can look at your application previously and see what you added, and they will. So I think it's surprising how people view reapplications as potentially a disadvantage when I actually think it's a pretty big advantage. So that's my 2 cents on reapplications. But you should definitely be sure to like lean into the parts of your app that are net new and actually do the reflective work, either with a coach, with a family member, with yourself, of like, where do I think I came up short? Why do I think I either didn't get an interview or got an interview and didn't get in? Doing that reflective work is gonna be really important. And like, there are places in your app where you can potentially bring that out too. Okay, cool. What else did we miss here? How to figure out what to improve if you got to the interview phase, but don't know why you did not make the cut. Yeah, so the best things you can do, also so many questions. The best things you can do about the interview, like kind of getting dinged at the interview phase, I think that's tough because you got so close. It's probably a couple things. It's probably, first off, the way to get better is to actually talk through honestly what you were asked, what you answered, and how you answered. because either the things you said or the way that you said them came up short. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've had plenty of jobs where like I could feel that I either didn't have all the relevant experience or I was emphasizing the wrong things earlier on in the interview process and I didn't get it. And I think the same kind of like inventory should be taken of your own process. And I would emphasize doing that as soon as possible after the interview, because while it's fresh in your head, you can actually recollect on small vibe things in addition to the actual specifics of what you said. Let's see what else there is.
I saw a question about if deferred applicants, do they prefer folks from non-traditional backgrounds? And when I think about traditional backgrounds for non-deferred applications, I think about some of those cohorts been referenced, the finance folks, maybe consulting, maybe tech, or some of those groups. But I'm not sure what what you have in your head as far as the difference between traditional and non-traditional for deferred. So
I think that's a pretty fair synopsis, though. I think like think a traditional corporate role, think a traditional like services or advisory role like consulting or banking. I think the line that I actually heard randomly at Admit Weekend, which is insane, it was in like April 2019, is the people who get in from traditional backgrounds manage to do the traditional route in a non-traditional way. So even if the overall is like, hey, I worked in banking, awesome. What sectors did you cover and what difference did you make that goes above and beyond? Great.
Totally. Like as an example, like I was at McKinsey, a ton of us were, or a ton of people were, but I specifically started a new like category of work in the context of our healthcare work. I started getting us doing a lot more mental health care work and working with universities to support suicide prevention, for example, which is like an entrepreneurial thing. And a lot of people, just like took their projects and did the work. So I think anywhere you can highlight what Ben just said, like how did you operate in your traditional environment differently? And then as far as do they prefer non-traditional versus non-traditional backgrounds, I think it's less about which specific lane you're in and just about you and kind of either lane. If you're in traditional or non-traditional, like you can be I think you get the point. You can be non-traditional in a traditional lane. So it's less about that specifically. And we did have folks from non-traditional backgrounds, right? Our drummer in our band was chasing sea turtles. He was a marine biologist. Another guy was a Navy SEAL. So you have all kinds. Another friend was a Michelin star pastry chef. So like we covered the whole gamut, traditional and non-traditional. So.
Yeah. And also like you, again, like the way that you view yourself relative to others could not be less relevant to the actual application and how you're going to get evaluated. And frankly, even if you like did something so random and different and your career path is messed up, I'll give you an example of someone I got a text from today who got into GSB. He worked in a random company after school that he didn't enjoy, then moved into sales, but really found his footing and crushed it in the sales world. And also happens to be doing a band 15, 20 hours a week on the side and has been doing like band work in New York. Nothing about that really screams like, this is a Stanford GSB profile. Like, look at this impressive person. It just kind of screams like, hey, this is a random person, but it's missing all of the interesting stuff because all of the really cool hustle and grind that he put into his work and the things that he took away made, in my opinion, his essay one of the most compelling I've ever read. And also he's just an awesome person and you get to talking to him for 5 seconds. Also, he had a low GPA. So like you get talking to him for 5 seconds, you're like, this is the kind of person I would want to work with, I can learn from, and who I would also just want to grab a beer with. And that mixture is the kind of the GSB alchemy, if you will.
Exactly. Let's see, we have a question here on the international side around
a lot of questions.
Yeah, this one's good. And I think this will help us clarify some stuff on the international piece around like let's see, industries with just knowing that folks internationally are coming from different backgrounds. Like Stanford's a super international school. And so the reviewers are used to evaluating people from all of these different contexts. I wouldn't worry so much about like them not understanding. I think there's some more work you can do in the short answer areas or in the resume areas where if you're working for a particular company, you could share like, this is what kind of company this is, or like, you could say like leading XYZ company in said country, for example. There's little stuff like that you could do throughout the application as like helpers, but it's not, I wouldn't presume in confidence on this one.
Nice.
Okay. You going, Missy?
No, I'm good. I was just saying that they're used to evaluating folks from many different countries, and the only advice I would give is wherever you can, if you feel like there's more context that they might not understand, you can add little bits of helper text or explanation where you think that would be most impactful. Whether on I'm imagining it on a resume mostly, or some of the short answer areas.
Okay. Anything else? We're around time, Missy. I just want to also respect your time. I'm good. I can stay on a few more, but I'm curious if there's any other burning questions from folks, because I want to just make sure we're hitting everything, and we tried to cover all the main pieces, and hopefully you guys found this pretty helpful.
Let's see.
Welcome, Stanish. Also, you have my favorite name in the chat. Stanish is an awesome name. Super great. You're my first Stanish. You're my favorite Stanish I've ever met, actually. After leading the session, I feel like I'm not ready. Should I apply the next year? Well, Liang, it depends on what round you're applying for, and when you say not ready, what you mean. Great question. Probably there are some pieces, or at least one piece of the application that's kind of getting under your skin a little bit, or maybe be feeling a little bit overwhelming. So that's the kind of thing you honestly should reach out to somebody for. So great.
No difference between GRE and GMAT. I mean, the tests are different, but they're not going to give you preferential treatment for one versus the other.
Cool. Cool. All right. Nope. Abe, I think that's the exact kind of thing that I wouldn't worry about. That's that's awesome. It would probably help your application. Taking a pay cut that's what I did. I left McKinsey and worked in public service and literally cut my salary by a third. So that's great. And guys, that's a perfect random question. Random not in the sense that it's not like, it doesn't apply to everybody, but you will have 74 of those thoughts. The most likely answer for all of them is no, it absolutely won't affect your chances at all. Like almost like when in doubt, if you ask yourself a question that looks like the one that Abe just put in the chat, it is almost certainly, nope, you're good. Don't worry about it. So that's how I would say.
Yep, I know we're coming up here. The round stuff, Moses. So round 1, round 2, generally speaking, no difference. Round 3, tougher. And the way I like to explain this is you can imagine if, you have to fill a class and they'll start filling the class, some in round 1, some in round 2. And then once you get toward round 3, they've filled up a decent portion of the class. So I always advise like the earlier you can apply in terms of rounds, the better. I would say that's most true for folks in those traditional roles, let's say, because you can imagine, if there are other Missies who worked at McKinsey, like similar backgrounds to mine, and they've taken one of those in round 1, there might, that's rare, but like it could happen, like might weaken the chances of me, Missy, round 2 with a similar profile getting it. I would say generally speaking, round 1 or round 2, you're doing great. Round 3 is tougher to get in and not recommended.
Yeah, I don't even think like it's a thing really, except for like a overseas deployment where you were literally prevented from applying or something. So
it does, round 3 does happen, but it's just harder, and it's already so hard to get in. Like, don't make it harder for yourself. Let's see.
We'll have to do the MSX for round 3. I would imagine it's similar, but it might not be as hard and fast. But I would imagine it's the same because they pretty much mirror the application process throughout. So that would be my going hypothesis, but something worth researching for sure.
Another thing, as you think of questions, after we get off, a good way to ask yourself or think through some of these questions is to put on your hat as an application reviewer. Like imagine you were at Stanford
charged with reviewing thousands and thousands and thousands of applications, and like how you would think about like what matters, I think if you put that framing on and ask yourself the question that you have, you'll get to a pretty good answer. And I know Ben and I are available, Leland, LinkedIn, like if you have follow-ups from this, don't be shy. Happy to answer quick questions, even if we don't work together. And thank you guys so much for, let's see. Brian, how long the process for writing took? I'm imagining Ben's was much shorter than mine because I was the engineer who hated essay writing. I don't know if that's any of you, but it's just not my favorite thing. And so for me, I'd say it probably took, I did it, you know, I was working full time. I started in May to apply round 1 in September. So what's that? So like June, July, August. So, you know, I probably took like 2 to 3 months end to end, but you know, it's not apples to apples. You know, you might have more time in a month in a more concentrated period than I did. Ben, what about you?
No, I did my whole applications for including the GMAT, start to finish, 6 weeks. Had no idea. Round 2, had no idea about the process, just kind of researched it and crammed it all in. Don't do that.
Don't be like Ben.
Don't do it. And I would say, like, again, I was telling someone earlier today, like, really minimize my chances of getting it as much as I possibly could. I was like, oh, here's the right way to do it. Let me minimize my odds by doing it a different way. So that was kind of my MO throughout the process. But something like writing an essay is like, that's something that I'm really good at. And so I was able to do it faster. Test taking, lucky I can kind of bang that kind of stuff out. There were other pieces of the application which I had put at risk. Like maybe my letters of recommendation weren't going to come across so smoothly. I had no idea, but I left that up to chance and I got lucky. So I wouldn't do that if you can avoid it. And especially with writing, like your ideas have to marinate. For me, it was, I wrote a draft, edited it like 6 times, like threw it in every possible trash can. And then woke up like one morning at like 4 a.m. at my, like, I was home visiting my family for the holidays and just banged it out from 4 to 7 a.m. And that was my essay writing process. Don't do that. Bad. Like, the odds that's going to be like a terrible writing process is like very high. But that's how I write. And so if that's not how you write, don't do that. So just my 2 cents. Missy, stop. Like, you're chiding me again. And this happens in all walks. So it's nice that you're continuing that. It's just great. Great for our chemistry.
Never a dull moment with Ben. He's such a brain.
Highest compliment. Thank you. I aspire to be just
well, I hope this was helpful and excited for you all. Business school was awesome. Highly recommend. Happy to keep answering more questions if it's helpful. And that's all. That's all we got, you know?
I think we can end on your lovely soprano and we'll be good to go.
Cool.
Oh, thank you for the heart. We love the heart. That's great. That's great.
Nice. Okay. Thanks, team.
See you all.